Hey, good morning or good evening. Welcome to the Hope Explained podcast, where we talk about the sermon that was taught on Sunday, anything that was left out for time, forgotten, or cut. I'm joined on my opposite side here by our lead pastor, Pastor Rick Morris. How are you today?
No pink tie today.
No pink tie?
No.
Come on.
No.
No pink shoes?
One time, I have yellow shoes, but yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yellow. But yeah, no pink tie.
Yeah, and so you wore the pink tie to honor our mothers, because we just talked about Mother's Day on Sunday.
What an amazing day that was.
It was.
Like, we had nearly 800 people here and incredible events. Our team, our staff did such an incredible job. It was an amazing day.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So fun.
Yeah, and it's always fun just to see everybody show up for that and take part in it. I think that's the most encouraging thing is you look around and everybody was having a good time.
I think the moms felt honored, and people stuck around forever taking pictures and eating cupcakes and drinking mimosas and getting flowers. And It was a great, great day. Worship was amazing that day. And yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah. All right. So let's hop into it. So like I said, we talked about Mother's Day. We talked about mothers on Mother's Day as it happens. And you talked about the story that happens in 1 Kings chapter 3. And that is the story of Solomon being approached by these two prostitutes. Do you want to give a quick recap on that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unusual story, which is why I called it an unusual Mother's Day message, because it wasn't your typical, Mother's Day message. I'd never taught on it before. But yeah, it's a crazy story. Like, you have these two ladies that have babies 3 days apart. They live together. There's nobody else in the house. And you want me to recap the whole story?
Just the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, so 1 Kings 3 begins in verse 16, and you basically have one child dies in the night, and the mother whose child died in the night made a switch in the middle of the night, and exchanged her dead baby for the living baby, and then they both wake up and they're arguing over whose baby is who. And in those days, the king handled civil matters, civil disputes. And so they come before Solomon, and Solomon makes a very weird request, but he solved the problem.
All right. So one of the things that you talked about, that the moment you said it, I was like, man, that's a good point. It was a great mother knows her child. And you talked about how with your mom, you could be on the phone for 5 seconds, and in the first 5 words, she could know if something is bothering you. And for me, we're focusing on mothers, and for me, something that pointed out to me was the two different genders. We exemplify God's great attributes in different ways, right? And for me, I immediately thought about, for us, that's God's intimacy, his emotional care towards us on full display right there through our mothers.
Well, I think kids a lot of times, especially teenagers, they're not gonna. I mean, most teenagers don't tell their parents everything. I don't know if that's groundbreaking news to parents, but your kids don't tell you everything. If you can remember back when you were a teenager, how much information did you tell your parents? So most teenagers don't really tell their parents things. But yeah, my mom had a way, and she still does, even, me as an adult, she may not know every detail, but she's got a way of knowing that something's off. And yeah, I think it's just something that God puts in moms, and moms have that. I call it like a spider sense. They seem to have that. They're in tune. I think more than dads. Dads are more like, okay, is the car running? What do you need help with? But the moms, I think, oftentimes can be really in tune emotionally to the kids. And this mom, it says that she looked more closely, which I think is something interesting, because moms do that a lot. They, a lot of times, not all dads, because dads are different, but a lot of times dads are more surface, kind of surface level, where the moms can go a little bit. They seem to want to go a little bit deeper, interested in more than just on the outside. And so, but anyways, so yeah, this mom looked more closely, and she knew that this was not, even though as an infant, hey, this is not my baby.
Right.
And she's able to distinguish that pretty quickly.
Another thing that you pointed out was using the typical mama bear as the example. Mothers they protect their children. And in the case of the woman who lost her baby, that led to some pretty devastating realization. In fact, one that she might not have been willing to realize, right?
Mm.
You talked about that desperation, and you said that you wanted to talk about that a bit more. Um, what do you think was the driving force for the woman who lost her baby to do this?
Well, I think she felt guilty. I mean, if this is what truly happened, where she rolled on top of her baby, which would have been a sheer, obviously, an accident,
Mm,
and that does happen. It happens these days as well. It's a horrible, horrible tragedy. And obviously, she's a mother that just had a baby. And, like the verse that we read in Psalms, like, how can a nursing mom not love her baby or forget her baby? And the idea is that it's impossible. Like, it just doesn't happen. It's very rare. And so this mother loses her child, and it's her fault if this is truly what happened, where she rolled on top of her. It's her fault. It's not, she didn't do it on purpose. It's obviously an accident. And, like sometimes parents leave their kids in cars, or children die in swimming pools. And it's just a horrible tragedy, an accident where it's nobody's fault. It's just a horrible thing that happens. And I think this mom, out of desperation, was like, how can I fix this?
mm,
And her first thought was, oh, there's another baby there. Let me have this baby. And I think it's easy for us to see her as like the bad, quote unquote, bad guy in the story. But, she's desperate. She feels horrible. And then two, when, they didn't really know anything of postpartum and all of that stuff. And who knows what emotionally and hormones. And
sure.
I mean, she did the wrong thing. There's no doubt. But also too, I don't think we should be too hard on her because of the overwhelming guilt and loss and pain that she felt. But then again, this other mother shouldn't have to suffer, for what happened to the other child. But yeah, I think moms have this natural protection over the creation that's inside them, which is why, and I don't want to get off on this whole tangent, but
Right.
which is why they try to tell us over and over that, that the baby in the stomach is not really a baby. It's only a fetus. Because if we can dehumanize something, which is what happened in any type of genocide or anything that happened with, with like the mass killing of all the Jews, they dehumanized them. If we say, well, it's not a baby, it's not a real baby, it's not a real life, it kind of, we're trying to alleviate maybe some of the guilt, from feeling of people that do, have to or choose abortion.
Hmm.
If we can not make, because moms have this natural protection. And so, yeah, I think it just, God puts it in moms to be very, very protective.
Mm. All right. And then the last thing that we wanted to talk about was this was kind of your ending note. It was the idea that with the Bible, it respects and it validates everybody. But more specifically in this context, it respects women no matter where they come from, moms no matter where they come from. And I thought that was great because, as you pointed out, you said this is something that the king would be expected to do because he handled civil cases. But more specifically, this is really interesting because even back then, he heard this case and cared about it, despite
Yeah.
these two women being the outcasts of the outcasts. They were prostitutes.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up because that's something that I kind of added a little bit later in my message as I reread it over and over. It's like, I think a lot of times we think people are less of a mother if they live certain lifestyles, or maybe they live in different countries or third world, or maybe even a different race. We think somehow they're less of a mom because, oh, they do this for a living, or they do this, or they do that. So they don't really care about their kid as much as I care about my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true at all. There are great mothers in all forms and economic backgrounds and races and all of that. God created moms to be moms, and no matter where they're at, no matter what they're going through. And so I just love, one of the things I wanted to really point out, and I love it, is just the Bible gives dignity to all people.
Mm.
And for Solomon, the king of Israel, and this proves to be what the Bible says, like a launching pad for his success and for him being known as somebody that's so wise. Because if you look at the end of that chapter, it says that people were amazed at his wisdom after the decision that he made. And so I just love how, even though these ladies were two prostitutes and Solomon could have easily, no, I mean, who cares about you guys? You guys are prostitutes.
Right. Take care of it yourself.
Yeah, figured out who cares. Like, and you lost a baby, who cares? You're a prostitute, which would have been the culture in those days. I mean, but I love how Solomon acts with compassion. He hears them. He cares about their situation. Not just the mom that lost the baby, but also the mom whose baby was still living. And so, yeah, I wanted to point that out because I think it's really important.
All right. Were there any, before we wrap up, because we always like to talk about anything that was cut, were there any other stories that you had considered going into Mother's Day?
Yeah, Hannah. I was going to do Hannah, and Samuel was one of the ones that I was kind of leaning towards, just because that's such an amazing story of her praying for so long for a baby, and then the Lord gives her one, and then she literally gives him back. I mean, to be, to learn in the temple and all of that. And, but yeah, I thought about that. I never thought, I had a lot of ladies after service say, thank you so much for not doing Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman or whatever. I never considered that. I've done it before, full disclosure, but I think everybody has. But, no, I mean, I pretty early on, I kind of latched onto this story just because it was something that I don't think I'd taught on before, that I can't remember teaching on. And it was just a story that kind of stood out. And I figured it'd get people's attention.
Yeah, that is true.
But it's an interesting story. The conclusion, I mean, is an interesting thing where Solomon is like, hey, bring me a sword, and we're going to decide whose child this is. Obviously, I had a couple of people ask me, and even though I mentioned it in the message, like, do you think he would have went through with it? And I'm like, absolutely not, because he knew that the real mother would either lay in front of the sword herself or would do what the real mom did. And that was, hey, there's no way that's going to happen. I'd rather give my child up than to see any harm come to my child. And so, and that's what happened. And that was the conclusion of the story. So one of the things that I'd like for us to do in the podcast, we were talking about a little bit ago, and we'll get the details together, is to start making this interactive, where if people have questions about the message, things that didn't make sense to them, or things they want further clarification on, or any questions really about anything, but it'd be great if they were about the message, then we'll answer those on a segment during the podcast as well.
Absolutely.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. So, like you just mentioned, we're going to be accepting questions here soon. It will most likely end up being my email or my phone number. We're going to figure it out. But if you have any questions about the upcoming sermons or past sermons, or questions about literally anything, please submit those. We will have those either in the next segment, or we will announce how to do that on Sunday. But other than that, we have some really great stuff coming up. We have VBS right around the corner. We have Dad Fest right around the corner.
Camps.
Yup, camps. So if you are looking for some stuff to do during the summer, please go to our website, newhopeeastlake.org, and hope to see you on Sunday. Our address is 2720 Olympic Parkway. So if you don't attend a church yet, we'd love to invite you as well to 9, 10:30 in Spanish at 12:30. But other than that, Pastor Rick, thank you for joining me.
Yes. Happy Mother's Day to everybody. Hope you had a great day.
Happy Mother's Day. All right. Catch you guys next time. Bye.